students, I'm Aanchal Sharma, your educator for paper 1. I am in front of you with another set of questions and we are in the series called as the last lab, the 30-day challenge just for you. Today again, we are going to solve some questions from teaching aptitude. So the question number 1, right in front of your screen. Identify the types of cognitive load that demands during learning. So what do you mean by these cognitive domains and the cognitive load and how the learning happens? A few things that this question is asking. I would read again. Identify the types of cognitive load. What all are the number of cognitive loads that are there when we talk about the learning process? Intrinsic, gestalt, extraneous, extinction, or you can say germane. So these are the few options. What do you think are the few domains? So we have options like A, B, C, B, C, D, A, C, E, and C, D, E. So I'll show you the correct answer. So the correct answer is A, C, and E. That means intrinsic, extraneous, and germane are the right answers. These are the types of cognitive domains, or you can say they are the types of cognitive loads that we are looking at. Now let us see what is the explanation that I have for you, and we'll see here in this explanation how the human brain works here, how we are going to process the information, how we are going to make the information directly stored in our mind. So this is what we are going to study. So the cognitive load. So cognitive load is the amount of knowledge. So cognitive, as I told you before, it is a domain, cognitive domain that has to do everything with the knowledge. So this cognitive load will talk about the gaining of the fact, the gaining of the knowledge. So the cognitive load is divided into 3 types, and the following are the 3 types that we have. The first is intrinsic load. This is often described as the inherent difficulty of the subject matter. So what is basically the intrinsic load? How difficult the subject matter is for me to understand. In my brain, I will receive few facts. What is basically the intrinsic load that I have to take to memorize the things and to understand the things, right? Think of it as the RAM, right? So this is basically like the RAM of the computer that is actually required for the software to work, like when you are web browsing or the web processor needed. It is generally considered fixed, and this is the instructional design that we have. So basically when we talk in terms of computer, we can relate all these things. So a computer would have an intrinsic load that is like a RAM, and when it comes to your, the load comes to your computer, it will handle it. Similarly, in our brain also, intrinsic load is taken. We register those facts, and this fact, the difficulty level of the facts is what we are talking about. What all are the different strategies and how you can deal with this intrinsic load, while the difficulty of the subject cannot really be changed. You cannot change the what all to study from science, what to study from mathematics. How to study is what, and how to memorize the thing is what you can change. So while it is very difficult for the subject, that because it cannot be changed, certain practices can be used to reduce the load, such as these practices are the sequencing. So sometimes you can learn the things with the help of the sequence, or you can also learn it with the help of the chunking. Like mnemonics is also a way to learn the things, right? And we did one question in which we saw how the knowledge using the mnemonics can be seen. So sequencing, presenting the parts of a concept in a sequence, can reduce the intrinsic load overall. Then there can be chunking done. So chunking is basically breaking the content into smaller parts so that you can revise, learn, and register those things properly. So breaking the content down into smaller yet meaningful units can help to reduce the load. However, care must be taken that when chunking of the content is done, you aren't removing the meaningful connections. So how can you understand those things? So you know that yes, The science, this topic from science is a tough nut to crack. It is something difficult to learn and to retain. So what will I do? That tough thing that I have to learn is my intrinsic load. That will be a load on my memory. But how can I learn? Using mnemonics, using sequences, or by chunking. I will chunk down the memory, or I will chunk down the content or the facts in such a manner that each thing that I have created is something valuable. So the 2 paras I have to learn, I divided into 4 parts and I know each part is valuable. So this is how I can learn the things. By doing all these things, my Germane load can also be reduced. Now that comes the Germane load. So this portion of the memory is devoted to the integrating of the new information, the creation and the modification of the schemas. Now this is an important word. What is the schema? Schema is the new knowledge and the old knowledge that you are relating. So you try to learn all these knowledge when it is directly inside your brain, then it is referred to as schema. The Germane load is similar to the memory used by the computer. So what you are giving the computer, the information you are giving to the computer can be an intrinsic load. How the computer is dealing and the memory of the computer is the Germane load. How you are trying to understand the different schemas. What is the new knowledge plus the old knowledge, and you're going to combine it to make the new knowledge. Right? So this is how you will learn. So I would read this para again. So Germane load is similar to the memory usage of the computer while it's actually installing your programs. The instructional design and the strategy should increase this type of load. So whenever you give a lot of instructions, the load increases, right? So load giving instructions is intrinsic. Having already the registered notions, or you can say having the memory there stored in the computer, and adding of the new would again make the Germane load. So if you give the instructions in a proper manner, then the load would be less. That is why we talked that if intrinsic load is properly given, then the Germane load will also be properly dealt. The more memory you can devote and the more efficiently you can give the content, the more better the Germane, or you can say the Germane load will be in your mind. Then come the extraneous load. So this is the portion of memory that is taken up by the process not related to learning at all. Now this is the load that you will take not by learning the facts or figures, but by something else. This is equivalent to the memory used by all the hidden programs. So you have other memory already stored. So that is your extraneous load. We already have different variables, right? So there are dependent variable, independent variable. There is extraneous variables. So what all are these? These are the confounding variables that come into play again and again. In between, they'll come up. So this is how this load come into play. We need to free up the memory that is already stored in the computer to store the new things. That is why what we are actually discussing here. If you are already having a lot of memory, you have to delete some previous memory to make a space for the new memory. So now I am telling you about the different load theories, or say I am telling you about the domains of knowledge. And then you already understood a lot of things previously, but now you thought that this is something you have to register in your mind. So what is the process that is going on? You are here trying to have an intrinsic load, that is the new knowledge, and then deal it with the Germane load, already present schemas plus the new knowledge, and you had some portions in your mind that had something other than what is the syllabus of UGC NET. So you have to do away with that thing. So there are your working memories, and that working memory is again and again used, while your previously stored memory is to be deleted. So this is how your brain works. So I'll show you a picture. This is the cognitive load theory. Here you have the intrinsic load. The complexity of the new information will determine your intrinsic load. Germane means linking of the new knowledge with the current information that you already have. Then you have the extraneous load, the unnecessary and the distractions that come into play. All these unnecessary informations that are stored at the back side of your brain are to be deleted. So this is the load that you have to delete from your brain. Now look at the other picture. So there are sometimes overloading of the information. So what is happening? There is some working memory, some memory that is being used again and again. But we all know that brain has a limited capacity to actually hold the position and of course to hold the information and to store it. Both of these things are important, and there is limited duration till the time you can learn these things. After you have registered something in your brain, you will keep them or move it to the back side of your brain. Now this is the long-term memory that is stored at the back. Here you have the short-term memory in the front and long-term memory at the back side. So what is happening here? You will ask for the information to come up. That means when the old information is coming in the front, it is called as remembering, the process to remember things. When this knowledge that you have learned is going at the back, that is when you are creating the things solid in your brain, right? Whenever you need something, you will bring the long memory, the schemas back front. So how can you learn things better? You will only learn things better when you keep on revising, right? So this will be the process through which you will store this memory in your brain for a longer period of time, right? So this is how the memory has the important role to play. Now this again we have one question, and this one is important. This is about the different kinds of education or learning that happens. So there is the question, what is true about the non-formal learning environment? Learning does not take place in a structured way, does not aim at certification. Learning takes place in a structured manner, takes place outside the formal educational structure, and intends to achieve the predetermined educational goals. So what do you think will be the correct option? I'll show you the answer. The answer is B. That means D and E are the correct options. Now we have three kinds of education or teaching that happens. So these are the three kinds of teaching. There are three phases of teaching, three levels of teaching, three domains of teaching. So in teaching aptitude, just to remember things, one tip is that there is always a rule of three that keeps on going on. So there are three phases, like you have the post-active phase. That means here the teacher is planning. Then you will interact with the student, interactive phase. And then there is the post-active phase, that is the pre-active, active and post-active stage. So post-active is when you evaluate, and pre-active when you are planning to meet the students. And interactive means, of course, the two-way communication that the teacher has with the students. So there are, again coming to the point, there are three kinds of learning or education that is happening. There is formal, there is non-formal, and there is informal, right? So what do you mean by formal education? Formal education is what we used to have in school and in colleges, that is with the fixed set of curriculum. We know that we have to study in a very structured manner. So when we were studying in a structured manner with a full-time educational path and in a well-structured, manner with a proper planning and proper facilitation, then it is called as the formal type of learning. This happens in your school, colleges and in universities, like the diploma degrees or other degrees like your BA, MA, etc. Then comes the non-formal education. So the non-formal education is basically education that has some complementary activities that you keep on learning. So this is contributing to your other fixed structures of studying. So you will say it is less structured, less planned and less facilitated. That means you go to coaching centers to study whatever is taught in the school. So that is less structured, but it is a type of what? It is a type of non-formal education. So it is not formally based, but it is somewhat structured. Then there are some courses, some workshops, some seminars. All of these will fall under your non-formal education. So I want to learn how to swim. This is something adding to my knowledge. So what is this? This is a kind of non-formal education. While if there is swimming lessons in my school as well and it is a part of my curriculum, it would become what? It would be a formal education. Then comes completely different and informal kind of education It is basically done between two friends, between two people, when you are just jogging, when you're just walking. Anywhere at any place of time, you can learn something from someone. So it is very deliberate and self-directed. If you want, you will understand things, and if you don't want, you will not be entertaining those things. But here there is some kind of force. The teacher will force you to study. But when we talk about the informal education, you are self-motivated. Either you want to gain things or you just want to leave that behind. But it is very spontaneous and it is unstructured. Here you have to be self-motivated to learn the things better. Here you have to be self-motivated. Now, where can it happen? It can happen anywhere. It is like a personal development and self-fulfillment that you will do. So you tend to make those friends who you think can contribute to your knowledge, right? So this is what? This is gaining informally with your friends. So what was the answer? The answer was B, that is D and E, because in non-formal education, learning does not take place in a structured way, right? Does not. Sometimes it is structured and sometimes it is not. So A is not the right option. So wherever you see A, you can strike it down. That does not aim at certification. It actually aims at certification. So it is less structured and it aims for other certification and other value education that you have. So that means B would be striked again, because not is written. Then learning takes place in a structured manner. It takes place in a less structured manner, right? It is always happening in a less structured manner. So that means C won't be the answer. C won't be the one included. That means D and E are the right answer. It takes place outside the formal education structure. So somewhere outside the formal education structure where your intention is to fulfill the predetermined educational objectives. So it was my educational objectives to learn things better. So I was studying in school and joined a coaching center to revise the things as well. So this is the non-formal education. Then another question I have in front of you, and this is related to the learner-centered and the teaching-centered methods. So you will find one question and they can twist the way in which they are asking the questions. So it is basically related to the learner-centered teaching method, and their question is, which of the following methods are learner-centered? So there are two types of learning or the methods of education. It can be the learner-centered or it can be the teacher-centered. So the learner-centered is that kind of education where learners are in between. They are the most important thing and the teacher is passive. While teacher-centered, teacher becomes the one who is active. So active learning, cooperative learning, inductive teaching and learning, and passive learning. So this question comes with a very easy approach and we all can solve it, but the question could have been more tougher. They can even give you examples and then ask you, is it teacher-centered or is it student-centered? So when it is a teacher-centered class, they can use the method of lecture. While when it is student-centered, there can be group discussions. So this kind of questions can also be made. So completely, just revise the different methods of teaching also. Now here, we all know that D won't be the answer. So wherever D is not there will be the answer. That means A, B and C. That means active learning, cooperative learning and inductive teaching. So what is active learning? Active learning is when the teacher is actively participating and the students are also actively participating. So there is no indirect examples given, but it is actively involved. Everyone is actively involved. Then there is cooperative learning. So cooperative learning can be two fellows or the two peer groups studying together, two teachers teaching together. It can be cooperative learning. Then can be inductive or deductive studies. So what is inductive? Inductive is you are moving from something smaller, from a specific thing to a general thing, or deductive can be from the general to something specific. So both of them are completely, they are really good way to teach in the class. Inductive reasoning or deductive reasoning, inductive teaching or deductive teaching and learning. Now let us differentiate between a teacher-centered learning and a learner-centered learning, because a lot of questions are asked from a statement-wise thing from here. So here in a teacher-centered learning, the focus is on the instructor, the teacher, while the learner-centered, the teacher is the facilitator and the focus is more on the students. But here you can also say that focuses on both, because teacher is the one teaching, but basically it is the student who are in the mind of the teachers, and according to them the things are categorized. Then focuses on the language, form and structure. Whatever the instructor says is right when we talk about the teacher-centered method. Here, in the learner-centered method, the focus is on the language, and such languages are used so that the students are clear with that. Then instructor talks and the child listen in the teacher-centered way of teaching, but the instructor only models, that the student is the one who will interact and the teacher is the one who is going to teach. So instructor will teach, and then there will be interaction between the teacher and the students. So they both are involved. Students alone work when we talk about a teacher-centered method, because teacher will give them work. But here the students work in pairs, in groups, and they depend on the different persons, and the purpose of activity is very important. So the basic goal is to make the students understand whatever way is used. The instructor monitors and corrects every student in a teacher-centered method, while in a student-centered method or a learner-centered method, the students talk without continuously being interfered by their instructor or continuously being monitored by the student, but feedbacks and corrections are also given here. Instructor answer the student's question about the language, and here students answer each other's question. So students are given the right to interact with each other. It's a cooperative learning. Two students can cooperate with one another and learn. Instructor chooses the topic, what to learn, when to learn, how to learn. And here the students have the choice and have their own opinion and have their own topics. Instructor elevates the student learning. It is the instructor who will give their best to elevate what the student is doing, but the student can never question the teacher. The teacher is comes with an attitude of know it all. And here the students evaluate their own learning and the instructor can evaluate them. The classroom is quiet, while the classroom will become a little more noisy and busier when there is a cooperative learning happening and the students are involved. So there will definitely be some amount of noise. Then the following is a list of some basic teaching competencies identified through various researchers in teaching. Which of the following would fall in the domain of behavioral competencies, right? So where you will think that the behavioral competencies come into play. So self-efficacy, locus of control, flexibility, planning, or you can say communicating. So in which of the following ways do you think you will find the behavioral competencies coming into play? I'll read again. A, self-efficacy, B, planning, C, locus of control, D, communicating, and F, that is flexibility. So I'll show you the answer. The answer is D for you, that is the B and D. That means your planning and communicating are the two behavioral aspects that the teacher shows. So let me read it. So a teacher's behavior would tell you how the teaching learning environment would go into play. It is basically known as the behavioral competencies of the teacher. So there are some personal competencies that the teacher would hold and some behavioral competencies. Now I'll show you some pictures and then of course I'll show you the material as well and some competencies so that you can write it down. And it is, it becomes very difficult to sometimes distinguish which is the personal competency, which is a social competency, and which are the behavioral characteristics or behavioral competencies. But here you have to keep on revising, and I'm going to tell you what all are the different types of competencies. So first of all, the answer, we have the planning, and then we have the communication competencies. So planning is what? Whenever the teacher comes into the class, she has to plan what is to be taught. This is the basic behavior that the teacher has to do. As their teacher, he or she tries all the activities and all the specific learning objectives that because of which she is actually here, that the aims of the students are met. That means all type of planning is done by the teacher, and it can be long term, short term, lesson planning, etc. Then comes communication competency. It states that the individual should be extremely proficient in articulating their own thoughts. They should be good with whatever they are saying. that whatever it be, written or oral, the teacher should know how to organize the class. Interacting well with the students, problem solving, productivity, and being responsible are the few types of, say, competencies that are important when it comes to the behavioral competencies. While the other competencies, like the teacher's self-efficacy, that means namely the teachers believe in their own ability that they can teach the class properly, is a kind of personal competency. So you don't have to confuse yourself, because the self-efficacy means the worth, self-worth of a person. Then we have the locus of control. The locus of control is basically that I have an internal or control orientation or external. So am I getting motivated by someone else? That will be external. If I'm self-motivated, that will be the internal. So the locus of control is the amount of motivation and where the motivation is coming, outside or inside. Then flexibility. So the efficient teacher will always be flexible and will talk to the students and will interact and of course create a balance between the student and the teacher. There will be some responsibility that the teacher has to do, and they'll create a good balance between the teacher and the children. So these all are your basically the personal competencies. Then there are other competencies. I will show you in with this picture or this matter that I have written. Things would be more clear. So there are about 10 teaching competencies that is given by NCTE. Now your homework is you have to write down the full form of NCTE, and I will surely check it in the comment section. Write down the full form of NCTE. There are some competencies that we have to talk about. The first is the contextual competencies. So what do you mean by contextual? Are the things clear to the teacher? Is the context, is the concept clear to her? So whatever she is talking is the contextual capabilities or the competencies. There are conceptual, that is the concept clear to the teacher. So the context and the concept. Then content related. What if you ask something related to what I'm teaching? I should be capable of answering that thing as well. So it is the content related competencies. Then there are transactional competencies. This is to relate the two things together. So it is the right of the teacher and it is the best quality of the teacher to relate the things. That is how the teaching and the learning process would become interactive. That is how the teacher can interact and do probing in the class as well. She can directly join something that the students have done previously with something they are learning new. So she should know how to do the free flow in the classroom of the topics so that the things become more and more interactive. Then educational activities related competencies. She should know what activities to be used. Then there should be good teaching learning material that she makes. Evaluation competencies. She should be good with evaluating. And then management. Management of the students is also very, very important. Then there are competencies related to working with the parents. She should know when to call the parents, how to actually, if they want to complain about a student also, then also it should be done in a good manner. So now there are different kinds of feedbacks. It is also a PYQ, and hence I'm telling you there are different kinds of feedbacks. So how many kinds of feedbacks? There can be negative feedback, positive feedback, direct feedback, delayed feedback. One kind of feedback is a sandwiched feedback. So in this sandwich feedback, so you must have looked at the sandwich. So this is something sandwich and there is a few layer. So it's looking like a burger, but when you look at the sandwich, there is always a filling in between, right? So what is it? You are giving between two positive things, you can slide down one negative comment so that you know that the child can improve themselves and there is no demotivating thing that is happening. So this is how you can interact with the parents properly. Then of course it is related, some qualities are related to the working with the community, working with other teachers and working with other members of the school. So this is how you can teach the students better. And characteristics of a good teacher is one thing that the UGC again and again asks questions from, right? So characteristics of a good teacher, characteristics of a good learner. And the two most important characteristics of a good teacher are what? She should be proficient in the subject she is teaching and secondly, she should motivate the students. These two things are very important. Then comes this question. Given below are the two statements, and one is your assertion, another is your reason. So let us read. Highly selective institutions typically have the higher completion rates than the open access institutes. Then the reason is this may reflect more on the prior learning preparation and motivations of the intact than on the productivity of the institutions they enter. So what do you mean by these statements, and are these statements correct or not? So the answer to this question is that both A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A. So though the answer is not given here, but I can tell you that both these statements are correct, and how we are going to discuss it. So we always see that the given statement 1, that is the assertion here, tells us that we have actually different institutes, right? So all these different institutes have a different way of doing the things, different ways of handling the things as well. The rate of which these institutes would show is actually different at each and every position. So highly selective institutes typically have a very higher completion rate, because to categorize these two things together, or to categorize actually the knowledge base, or to characterize how the PhDs are completed, when the PhDs would be complete in the higher education sector, is a very difficult task. So it is difficult to come down to the boiling point or come down to a solution that yes, this is a university that is performing very good. So it becomes very tedious to collect the data. That is why they are saying that the highly selective institutes typically have higher completion rate than the open access institutes. Not all the information are readily available here. This may reflect that there are some prior learning things as well, some motivations already available, and some productivity that is already seen in the institutes. So I would say that assertion is correct and the reason is also correct. Now this is one type of question that is a very direct type of question, and also this is one thing that the students can get confused in, because it's an open-ended type of question. So these questions are like speed breakers, and we keep on discussing all these questions that in which you really have to just use the presence of mind and solve the answers, right? And solve the questions, and you can come to the conclusion on your own with just the presence of mind. So here you have to read more so that you can solve the answers. Okay, so the answer is given here. That means both A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation. So as I told you, so these are the speed breaker type of questions, and this thing is what they are trying to judge. So they are seeing that they're just judging that do you really connect the dots. Here we find that they are talking about highly selective institutes, and we know that all these higher education institutes have a lot of parameters, and it becomes difficult to judge them. Even the NAC grading also, it is a very tedious task, where there are so many you can say so many criteria through which they try to judge which is the institute that is performing well. So here you can say that the data is limited. There is some prior learning, there are some PhDs that you don't know, and there are some productivity in the institutes that can be directly different from another institute. Hence, you can say that yes, both assertion and reason are correct, and this is the correct reason for the assertion that we have. Right? So thank you so much. This is what I had in the today's video. All these questions are from 2020 or 2021, asked in 2022, and these are important because this will help you know how the questions are asked and to solve the questions. These concepts become important for you, and keep on revising these concepts on your own as well. So thank you so much for attending the class. Keep smiling and keep studying. Thank you.